Congresswoman, you were in Chicago last week hearing from residents and local leaders impacted by ICE actions there. And I want to play something that you heard from one young woman who is now left to take care of her disabled younger sister after their mother was detained. Let's listen.
I take care of all her responsibilities far beyond what I can handle at night. I'm only 19 years old. I'm still a kid who has so much to learn, and yeah, I feel like in the last 4 weeks, I've grown up fast, taking all of my mom's responsibilities as fast as she was taken away from us. I don't know what to do in this moment. Her absence is tearing our family apart.
Stories like that are tough to listen to. What is your message to Americans facing realities like this and pleading to Democrats for help?
Anna, Genesis was so brave, so courageous. She is one of the many people that we heard from when we were in Chicago. I was able to bring 19 members of Congress, all Democrats, of course, from all over the country for this shadow hearing because Republicans refused to hold ICE accountable. And what we heard, both in private roundtables as well as public hearing, was the kind of stories like Genesis. I mean, the day before we had a roundtable, private roundtable, because people are terrified to speak out with directly impacted people. And there was a young man who serves in the armed services abroad who had to fly home because his father was detained. By the time he arrived back, his father was deported. And he said, I put my life on the line for the military, for this country, and my father has been deported. Another young woman whose mother was selling tamales and was picked up, similar to Genesis's story, and she is left now taking care of her younger siblings. A school that we went to that was tear gassed right outside. In fact, the morning that we went, there had been raids across that area, and a number of schools were in lockdown, soft lockdown is what they call it, because they couldn't, I mean, people are not showing up. You know, we had a roundtable with businesses, 40% down on revenue in the area that is the second largest contributor to the tax base of Chicago. And so really on every level, this is so horrific. And I think that the accountability has to come from all of us, including Republicans, because when you have the director of the Customs and Border Protection division throwing tear gas against a court order, it shows just how lawless this administration is and how the public has to rise up, because certainly Republicans at this moment are not doing so.
I want to come back to health care in a moment, but the Treasury Secretary accused you of playing politics personally. And I know that your Democratic whip, Catherine Clark, said on Fox this past week that shutdowns are terrible, but as she put it, it's one of the few leverage items Democrats have. Do you think Democrats are gaining from this fight?
No, our focus continues to be on driving down the high cost of living for everyday Americans. Donald Trump and Republicans promised that they would lower costs on day one. We know costs haven't gone down. They're going up. Inflation is moving in the wrong direction. The Trump tariffs have made life more expensive for the American people to the tune of thousands of additional dollars per year. We know that electricity bills are through the roof. Housing costs are too high. Childcare costs are too high. Groceries too expensive. And now tens of millions of Americans are at risk of having their premiums explode. In some cases, by $1,000 to $2,000 per year. That's what this fight for us is all about. Republicans have come up with a new conspiracy theory every week for the last 6 weeks. The Democratic position, Margaret, has been clear. Cancel the cuts, lower the costs, save health care.
Well, that was the quote from the whip herself when she said leverage. But I hear you on rising healthcare costs, but the immediate term, people aren't getting paid. 750,000 federal workers are on unpaid leave. 80% of the folks who work on our nuclear program are included in that figure. The Agriculture Secretary said there will be delays in food stamps for many of the 41 million people who rely on SNAP. And then at airports across the country, half of the flight delays, according to the Transportation Secretary, are because of staffing shortages. This pain is real now. So is there a point at which it becomes too great to justify continuing the shutdown?
Well, there is an urgent need to reopen the government, which is why we continue to demand that Republicans sit at the negotiating table so we can enact a spending agreement that's bipartisan in nature. That's what we've called for from the very beginning.
But the Republicans are saying they won't do that until you pass the funding bill, the clean funding bill that already passed the House. Why can't Democrats in the Senate get on board with that?
Well, we've made clear, and I'm thankful for the leadership of Chuck Schumer and Senate Democrats, that we were not going to support a partisan Republican spending bill that continues to gut the health care of the American people in an environment where Republicans have already enacted the largest cut to Medicaid in American history. Hospitals, nursing homes, and community-based health centers are closing all across the country. There's the possibility that Medicare could face a $536 billion cut, the largest cut to Medicare in history, if Congress doesn't act by the end of this year because of what Republican policies have done in their one big ugly bill. And now they refuse to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. That impacts working class Americans, middle class Americans, and everyday Americans throughout the country, including in rural America.
Well, they haven't refused. Leader Thune said he'd even put that up for a vote if you open the government first. But
as of the 1st of next month, Donald Trump is planning to cut food assistance for seniors and children. Here's a bit on that.
States are warning struggling Americans who rely on food stamps to pay for groceries that they may miss out on benefits come November. It comes after the USDA sent out letters saying that if the lapse in appropriations continues, there will be insufficient funds to pay full benefits next month.
Now, this is a shutdown, just to remind folks, by Republicans. We have a Republican president, Republican House, Republican Senate. They could keep the government open if they negotiated with Democrats, but they're unwilling. And so the president wants to inflict the maximum amount of pain. This is something very different than prior presidents during this shutdown. And he wants to direct that pain first at blue states. So he started by cutting a lot of grants in blue states. And then he wants to go after Democratic constituencies, people that he doesn't view as supportive of his agenda. So you might remember in that big, beautiful bill, as Donald Trump calls it, I have another term for it, Republicans cut $187 billion out of the SNAP program, out of food assistance. That was well before the shutdown. So they're just using the shutdown to cut even further a program they don't like. They took that money, by the way, they took that money for tax cuts for super rich people. That they can afford. Food for needy families, no, that's not in their budget. As a result of those cuts, millions of people are going to lose out. And as I said, predominantly seniors and children. But now during the shutdown, he wants to make this worse. Now, the administration claims that they're forced to do this by the shutdown. That's simply not true. In fact, here's what USDA had to say earlier this year on the subject. Congressional intent is evident that SNAP's operation should continue since the program has been provided with multi-year contingency funds. So that's right, the USDA acknowledged months ago that there was a contingency fund that can be used during a government shutdown to make sure these benefits continue. But Donald Trump doesn't want them to continue. He wants people to go hungry, and so he's cutting off that benefit. And so what that means is millions of people beginning in November are going to get reduced or no food assistance. So I guess everyone has their priorities, and Donald Trump's priority is a gilded ballroom. My priority is making sure that people get fed.
Iowa Congressman Zach Nunn, who sits on the House Select Committee on the CCP, joins us now. Congressman, the Treasury Secretary did not ultimately detail what the details of the deal are when he talked to the media this week, but he said they are all worked out. What needs to be in this deal, Congressman, to keep Americans, specifically our kids, safe?
Well, Todd and Carly, you hit the nail on the head here. The president and Todd Bessent have led a great effort to make sure that we're securing not only our social media platforms, including TikTok, but that we're not allowing the Chinese to run away with that information, where it's stored, how it's messaged, what type of propaganda can be on there, and that it is a U.S.-based company. Look, Congress did our job, and the president's doing the right thing here. It's the art of the deal, what's in the realm of the possible, on making sure this becomes a U.S. company. But we should never forget the President Xi is also playing from the art of war in trying to aggressively go after ways that they can advise or even manipulate the U.S. population if TikTok remains in Chinese hands. We saw it firsthand after Congress did our job and passed a law to say that either TikTok needs to become U.S.-based or we're not going to have it here in the United States. China has never allowed TikTok to be operated within China. We know that Chinese operators use TikTok as a messaging point to children, to youth, to Americans across the way to try and drive their priorities on the platform when it was being divested. And President Trump has used this as part of a compendium of negotiating tactics against President Xi to say, we want this U.S.-based, favorable to America, protected, and we know that this is secure going forward, not only for our youth, but for every American who's on the platform.
So from what you've heard regarding the details so far, and some of those details were released in September, where are you in terms of concern over national security when this deal is signed?
Yeah, Carly, so I have a very big concern here that the data itself is owned and retained by the United States, that the Chinese Communist government does not have access to either manipulate or operate that. And it comes as part of a bigger conversation here. We need the rare earth minerals that China has kept a chokehold on for all of our operations, whether that's one of the million iPhones a day that were being produced in China to advanced weapon grade systems. This is all part of a bigger conversation. And look, I'm here in Iowa. I think the president's done a fantastic job of building coalitions and allies so that we can do everything from keeping TikTok in the United States to being able to sell soybean, beef, corn to allies that surround China. This is forcing China to come to the table and be a real actor here. China has a bad history in intellectual property theft, everything from our weapon systems down to small businesses right here in the Midwest. Stealing, proliferating them, and then replicating them is the Chinese way. We've got to make sure here in the United States we have a TikTok that is owned and operated, whether by Oracle or others, and has Chinese buyout, that it's going to be U.S. going forward.
We would be remiss if we did not ask you about the government shutdown as a sitting congressman. Going into day 27, SNAP benefits expected to end on Saturday. Do you think the ending of SNAP benefits really puts pressure on Democrats because their constituents are then going to really hammer Democrats to end this shutdown? Or does it the other way around? Is it Republicans that are really going to face the pressure from their constituents this week?
Yeah, Todd, let's be clear. Congress did our job. We passed a bill to make sure SNAP and WIC and military pay, for that matter, were all covered now through the first part of November here. We want to get back to work doing this. The challenge is we've got a handful of senators, all Democrats, who refuse to come to the table. We're now in the second longest shutdown in U.S. history. It doesn't have to be like this. And come November 1st, Americans are going to get slapped in the face by the inaction of Schumer's shutdown and the Democratic holdouts. That's everything from SNAP infecting 250,000 Iowans in my home district. And we're going to be out at food pantries all this week, making sure that they're ready for the potential onslaught of families who need this. But it also means that the millions of military members who may not get their pay, including 2,000 Iowa Guardsmen who I've served with, who are forward deployed right now, may not be paid for their service. It's unacceptable, and it falls squarely on the hands of the Democrats who refuse to come back to the negotiating table and get this government open. We can have long-term conversations, but the first thing we need to do is make sure that women with independent children, families that depend on SNAP, and military members and critical federal employees get their paycheck. They've earned it. They deserve it.
Congressman Zach Nunn, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for joining us.
So the government shutdown is heading into its fourth week, and no deal is really in sight. I don't think they're even talking to each other. The Democrat conspired to work to this work stoppage, and they're using health care subsidies as an excuse to not come to the table. And millions of Americans are likely to face sticker shock anyway when those key federal subsidies expire. On average, nationwide premiums for the Affordable Care Act are up 18%. Obamacare is now the Unaffordable Care Act, and it isn't working. If a Democrat's in power, they throw money at it. Republicans are trying to fix it. But do they have a plan to help now? Because we all agree it's a crisis, and no one wants to see a family going paycheck to paycheck struggle. So aside from spending the bulk of his career in the medical field, Dr. Bill Cassidy is now a senator in Louisiana looking to fix this problem and looking to get 60 votes in the Senate to get that budget passed or the continuing resolution confirmed. Senator, do you agree with Democrats that health care is a problem?
Health care has to be a problem. By the way, they're going up, the premiums are going up on the exchanges 30%. They're going up in the employer-sponsored insurance market 20%. That's like totally independent of the Obamacare exchanges. That's just what you and your employer are paying. Now Schumer could end the shutdown like today, but what we got to do is lower the cost of health care, not just paper it over for Obamacare exchange with subsidies. Let's lower the cost of health care for everybody. That lowers premiums in the employer-sponsored insurance market and on the exchange.
So that is the issue that they brought up, but it really has nothing to do with the continuing resolution. This is Biden's budget that you're on right now. You're looking to start your budget, and if the appropriation bills were done, you would have been debating that, handed in on time, wouldn't have needed a CR, but you do. So how do you handle this?
Well, first, again, Schumer can end this today. But the ironic thing is, if Schumer would open the government, there are bills that have been considered and passed and co-sponsored on a bipartisan basis that could lower the cost of health insurance for everybody. And like things that are like, you think of football, the New York Jet kid, where you almost have broken the plane of the goal line and just a little bit of nudge, and you can lower the premium substantially for everybody, including those on Medicare. Now, if Schumer would open the government, we can consider those, pass them, and lower premiums by lowering the cost of health care, not by dumping billions of federal taxpayer dollars to subsidize.
So I see right now, they say that about 13 House Republicans in competitive re-election districts are asking the House Speaker to consider some way of extending the premium assistance. I'm pretty sure that's a no-go with the president. What about you?
Could you get a compromise? Going forward after that, you could actually lower the cost of health care. If Schumer would end the shutdown, we could start working on that. Right now, we're stuck like something in amber. We need to break the logjam so we can put these proposals in place and save money for everybody.
So, Senator, I just got to ask you your opinion. Over in Louisiana, the two biggest cities are Baton Rouge and New Orleans, and crime has been an issue there in the past. You need cops. If the president said to you, I want to give you the team I put in Memphis, give you the team I put around D.C., give you the team in Portland and Chicago, would you take them in New Orleans?
Where the crime is bad. Because we know that no matter the color of the uniform, when you have law enforcement out there, crime goes down. It's not a permanent solution. You got to transition to greater support for state and local, particularly local police officers. The more local police you have, that is a permanent solution, and that's how you have safer streets. Let's get on it.
Right, and I know recruiting's been tough. It's tough to get cops. I was just in New Orleans the other day, and they were saying there's just not enough of them. Maybe the president could come in with some people and also bolster up recruiting as part of the program. Senator Bill Cassidy, one day I want to talk to you about your healthcare expertise and how to fix it as opposed to how to end the shutdown. In this case, we did both. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian.
We're in Bronzeville at Bright Stars, a full-service community shelter. Over 200 residents get care from everything they could possibly need. What we need to know is just a couple weeks ago on this very ground, people who were on their way to work who live here, people who were come here to volunteer, there were about 7 or 8 cars coming with ICE masked people, and they chased them through this area, tackled them, took them. Even those with documentation were taken. This is a reign of terror. This isn't to make us secure, it's to make us scared. We have to fight back. We certainly appreciate Pastor Harris and everyone who works here for the great work that they do. We need to back them up now more than ever.
Republicans have shut down the government to slash health care for Americans.
And now we're in, week 3, Jeff, of this Republican shutdown?
We are. And over, Democrats have been offering the Republicans a chance to fix the health care mess they made and open up the government.
That's right. Look, and over, they're refusing. I mean, they're even blocking votes now.
They are indeed. And here's what's at stake. Nothing small, it's huge. 15 million Americans are getting kicked off their health care.
And more than 20 million Americans are going to see their cost of health care just skyrocket.
This is literally a matter of life and death. These cuts will cause a projected 50,000 deaths a year.
And Republicans know their own constituents want the health care tax credits extended.
And in fact, 3/4 of people who get the tax credits are in states that Trump won. But there's a way out of this impasse, one that Democrats are offering over and over.
A simple proposal that would fix the Republican healthcare crisis.
And make sure that President Trump implements the bipartisan funding bills as the law says.
That's so important and so needed. Now look, Republicans own the shutdown. They're in charge of the House, they're in charge of the Senate, and they're in charge of the White House.
Democrats are standing strong for you and your family's health care.
So joining me now here in Dallas to discuss this cost is Texas Congressman Brandon Gill. Congressman, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about this for just a moment, and let's push the conversation forward. I think we've focused righteously on the southern border. I think we've focused righteously on deportation, but you know, there are gains being made on both fronts. But there are other issues when it comes to immigration and serving Americans. And that's what do we do with the legal immigrants? What do we do with asylum seekers? What do we do with refugee status? What do we do about making sure that everyone that comes here actually wants to be an American?
Yeah, well, you talked about the costs. Outside groups have estimated the cost to be about $182 billion every single year for the American taxpayer of illegal immigration. That's just the economic cost. That's not even getting into the drugs and the crime and the social problems and the cultural incompatibility, which is totally reshaping American communities. What President Trump has done to secure the border within just a few weeks of getting in office has been nothing short of phenomenal. It's something that we've talked about for so long that we want to actually get the border secure, and he did it. He was the one president who was actually willing to do it. So that's where we first start. But as we're talking about somebody driving on our roads using CDL license who shouldn't be in the country to begin with, that's where deportations kick in. That's where this is important to put the pedal to the floor to deport the people who came here illegally and shouldn't be here to begin with.
We've talked about the cost. And here's another cost. You know, we talked about why Democrats are seeking to serve those who are not even Americans, illegal immigrants. And I think many people watching at home would probably look at the television screen and yell at me, Will, it's also about maintaining their power. It's about voting base. And they would be validated. You watching at home, you would be validated when you hear news like this. Texas, this state, has identified thousands of potential illegal immigrants on the registered voter rolls.
Right. So you ask yourself, why would Democrats do this? Why would they support open border policies, which is clearly their party's platform with regards to illegal immigration? And it is exactly this. It's to import a voter base, people that they believe will vote Democrat perpetually for life. And we see illegal aliens on the voter rolls, just like here in Texas, who are now getting kicked off. But it's not just that. It's that whenever you bring in large numbers of people, that impacts the census. The census counts not just American citizens, but the total number of people in any given state, and that impacts congressional apportionment, and it benefits blue states at the expense of red. In other words, you have states like New York and Illinois and California who are, as a matter of policy, harboring illegal aliens, and they get more congressional representation, more members of Congress from those blue states because of the illegal aliens who are there. That's what they're doing. It's a plan to cynically, systematically rig our elections in their favor.
It's such an interesting point about the census, and it only serves to complicate this entire problem, which the issue of illegal immigration, but immigration at large is one that has to be unwound and more thought out and have a real conversation in this country, not dismissed as jingoism or bigotry, but rather, what does it mean to be an American? And from the census to the voter rolls to cultural assimilation, these are conversations that must start now. And I agree with you. The border, by the way, that's just the start. Deportations, no matter what kind of freak out we see in the streets, that should just be the start. Before you go, I just want to ask you about this news from the last hour. The United States saying to Ukraine, do what you have to do. That basically now not holding the reins anymore on Ukraine using long-range missiles into Russia.
Well, listen, we have a president who is the deal maker in chief, who is searching for peace, whether it's in Russia or whether it's in the Middle East, and he's been wildly successful. So I'm excited to see where this goes, but I trust in the president, and I think the American people trust the president to make the right decision here. And listen, what we want to see is this war in Ukraine and Russia to come to an end. We want the fighting to be over. We want the killing to be over. And I think that's where the president is taking it.
It's nice to see someone use leverage on the international stage, not the suffering of Americans as leverage during a government shutdown.
Right.
Congressman Brandon Gill, great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
In a few days, millions of people in this country are going to have their SNAP benefits canceled. They're going to lose their food benefits. And there is absolutely no reason why that should happen. Congress sent the administration a letter reminding them that they have the funds. And in fact, there is a contingency fund to make sure that everybody can continue to get their benefits. But the administration is still insisting that those benefits be canceled. What kind of sick in the head people think like that? People will go hungry. Hunger will increase in this country. And so Democrats are for making sure that people get their SNAP benefits. And you know what else we're for? We're for making sure that people don't see their health care premiums double and triple. And that's what this whole battle is about right now in Washington over government funding. And if this were a tax cut for a multimillionaire or billionaire to get Jeff Bezos another yacht, you could bet your ass that Trump would be on a plane back here, to get that deal done.
Maduro and Petro in Colombia are very good friends with Hezbollah, with Hamas, with China, with North Korea, and with Russia. And it's time, and we have to commend the Trump administration for taking the step forward of sending the message that the Monroe Doctrine is alive. And what Trump is doing is buying decades of peace for our children and our grandchildren. So bravo to the president.
We're now on day 27 of the Democrats' shutdown, and the consequences are getting more severe every single day. Over the weekend, we saw federal workers lined up at food banks, as our majority leader was just saying, as they are being forced to figure out how to feed their families. We saw control towers at major airports such as Dallas, Fort Worth, Newark, and Phoenix facing significant staffing shortages. And if the Democrats fail to pass our clean CR and reopen the government this week, more Americans will miss their hard-earned paychecks. Some states will be forced to cut off SNAP benefits, including my home state of Minnesota. Thankfully, the Trump administration and private sector companies have stepped up where Democrats have refused. President Trump has found creative solutions to help pay our troops and fund WIC benefits for moms and young children for just a little bit longer. DoorDash announced yesterday that they will help support Americans by delivering free meals to food banks and waiving delivery and service fees on grocery orders for SNAP recipients. But these are Band-Aid solutions to the Democrats' self-inflicted shutdown problem. Remember, it doesn't have to be this way. There is a nonpartisan government funding bill sitting in the Senate ready to be sent to President Trump's desk immediately. We just need 5 Senate Democrats to come to their senses, do the right and reasonable thing, and support our clean CR. Contrary to what House Minority Whip Catherine Clark believes, the American people are not leverage in the Democrats' shutdown charade. And we refuse to negotiate under hostage conditions, nor will we pay a ransom. So our message today is the same as every other day, and we're glad to see, as the majority leader mentioned, that the American Federation of Government Employees, by the way, the largest government employee union, 820,000 federal employees, have joined us in saying enough with the political games, support our clean CR and reopen the government like your constituents' livelihoods depend on it, because they do. With that, Mr. Speaker.
The administration said it is not going to use emergency funds for SNAP benefits during the government shutdown. At least 25 states are going to cut off crucial food assistance for more than 40 million people next Saturday, November 1. That includes 4.5 million in California, your state. What are your concerns about how this is going to impact your constituents, and how much will this increase pressure on Democrats to end the shutdown?
Yeah, I've been talking with local electeds here who are having heartburn as they're trying to figure out a way to protect moms and little babies who are going to be cut off from SNAP benefits. Over 50,000 households just in my district alone rely on CalFresh, which is the California version of SNAP. And we also know that this president is once again just punishing the American people, because really he is obligated to use emergency funding to make sure that SNAP benefits are paid through November. Why he's decided to forsake the American people while he is, spending almost $350 million building a ballroom to himself, is really, really a distortion of values coming out of this White House.